but I'll turn it over to you, Lisa.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. And this is just a reminder that today's presentations will be recorded and posted on the Whitburn Center's website and YouTube channel. We ask that you please keep your mics on mute. We will have time for questions and answers at the end of the presentations. My name is Lisa Lewis, and I'm the Administrative Manager in the Whitburn Center for Governance and Policy Research at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. At UWO, we acknowledge the original inhabitants of this area, the Menominee and Ho-Chunk nations. This land encompasses the 3 campuses of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh in the Lake Winnebago region. Please take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds and celebrate the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about the Whitburn Center. The Whitburn Center was established in the fall of 2021 through a generous donation from our founding benefactor, UWO alumni, Jerry Whitburn. Our mission is to conduct nonpartisan, practical, applied research focused on evaluating and improving governance, professional management, and public policy in Wisconsin and beyond. Our mission is to build local government, nonprofit, and community capacity to promote the common good. To do this work, it requires bringing people together in spaces like this to work together to share knowledge and equip public professionals with tools and resources to better understand the dynamic topic areas surrounding Wisconsin's public sector. We're happy to have all of you join us and learn alongside you. And with that, we will introduce today's presenters.
All right, welcome everybody. Michael Ford here. So we have 3 presenters today. One of them is me, so I'll introduce myself last before I get into it. But we do have Dr. Sam Larson, who is a tenured professor of public administration here at UW-Oshkosh and research director of the Whitburn Center. She's also currently a co-principal investigator on a $1 million National Science Foundation advance grant that focuses on the recruitment and retention of STEM women faculty from historically excluded groups at UWO. Sam's research focuses on how public service and policy can advance social equity, democracy, belonging, resilience, and healing. She has authored multiple publications and served in various public and nonprofit organizations with rural, environmental, and educational missions for over 15 years. We also have Jennifer Gauthier. I hope I pronounced your name correct, Jennifer. I've only known you for like 7 or 8 years here. But Jennifer is a graduate of our program and the director of the Sustainable Development Institute at the College of Menominee Nation. Programming projects and research are focused on the Menominee theoretical model and Menominee sustainability. For this position, she worked with the Division of Extension for nearly 11 years, where she helped local government and educational institutions with planning, health-focused community development efforts, and Indigenous food sovereignty work. Jennifer also has experience in tribal government, having worked at the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin. And Jennifer is also an adjunct professor at the College of Menominee Nation and serves on a number of local boards where Menominee language revitalization and food sovereignty are prioritized. Jennifer earned a Master's of Public Administration from UW-Oshkosh. She also won our HINTS Award, which goes to a high-performing student every year, and has a bachelor's degree in political science from UW-Madison. And last but not least is me. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Lisa, can you give me permission to share my screen? It's telling the world I can't, or telling me I can't. So the host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, let me see if I can do that.
Well, should we kick it off? Sam, do you want to step in and do this while I sort out what I'm doing wrong?
Well, I was just going to give you, Lisa, the path to provide you with the power to share your screen. If you make him a co-host, Lisa, Dr. Ford should be able to share his screen.
So those of you in the audience who have had me in class are aware these are the types of things that occur when I'm giving a talk. Things go wrong. So as they figure that out, I can tell you a little bit about myself and what the goals are here today. So I've been at UW-Oshkosh for about 10 years, which is hard to believe, but I'm currently the program coordinator for the Masters of Public Administration program. I'm also the director of the Whitburn Center. I'm here at UWO, and I'm also a co-host now. I saw that, so I think I'm going to be able to share my screen. But prior to entering academia, I spent a heck of a lot of time working in the practitioner world, and that includes working as a lobbyist, doing some nonprofit management stuff, managing a couple of political campaigns. So certainly I come from that practitioner background. But anyways, let me get my slide here. And certainly if people have questions along the way, put them in the chat and we'll have some time at the end, as Lisa said, to go through them. But can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
All right. All right. I'm teaching undergrads for the first time this year for like 5 years, I think. And I'm used to giving, talks where no one pays attention or offers me any feedback. So it's good to know that this is working. So the goals here for this Whitburn Wednesday was we wanted to spend this time to give you a little bit of introduction about the MPA program, but also about the faculty in the MPA program and the type of work we do to connect our research to practice. Because I find that a lot of students don't know that our job description is technically 40% teaching, 40% research, 20% service. Students generally see the teaching side, obviously, but certainly it's all intertwined. So I'm happy to share a little bit about the type of research I do and how I connect it to practice. And then Sam and Jennifer will give much more impressive talks than me. So first and foremost, the Masters of Public Admin program offers an MPA degree that's an applied degree, and it's very much geared toward practitioners. We have over 600 alumni from the UWO MPA program. We've been around for, I think, 52 years. And it's always amazing to me when I travel the state doing some of the work I'm going to talk about here, how often I meet an MPA grad that I didn't even know was an MPA grad. We've certainly done a really good job historically, and by we, I mean the people that came before me, of placing our graduates in high-level public and nonprofit management positions throughout the state of Wisconsin. So it's really cool to know that all of you who are currently students are going to be part of this larger UWO MPA network that's making an impact. All of our faculty have real-world experience that we bring to the classroom. I mentioned a little bit about that in the introduction to Dr. Larson, but I'm sure she'll expand on that. But Dr. Filipova, too, who couldn't be here today, also comes from I say real world. Academia is the real world, kind of. But what I'm saying here is that we all have practitioner experience. And I think that works well because our students are practitioners. You're coming to get your MPA degree because you want to advance your own career. You want to advance your communities. You want to advance your states, the nation, whatever it is your goals are. We get that those are not theoretical goals. Those are real world goals. All of our faculty are heavily involved in service at the state and local level. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's another way that we continue to have that hand in the practitioner world. All of our faculty are research active, which is really cool to me to be a part of, because it means that our faculty are connected to a broader world and not just hyper-focused on our community, our state. Doesn't mean we discount it, but it also means that we can beg, borrow, and steal from the cutting edge research other people are doing and bring it back to our network. Our students are definitely our greatest resource. Every time I have a student that's interested in pursuing an MPA, I always brag about our students. We have 75 students currently in our program. Most of them are working full time. And I think some of the best networking and job placement that occurs in our program occurs from those student to student relationships. And certainly a lot of what we do as faculty and the things we learn as faculty and we apply in our classes and our research come from the real world experience students share with us. And that's why we want you to do practical work in all of our courses. But I'll keep rolling here. You want to hear about my anxieties, right? This is the big one. If you've had me in class, you probably heard me say this. If you're not in our program, you haven't heard me say this. But I go back to this cliche that the fundamental challenge of democratic governance is that resources are finite, meaning we're never going to have enough. We're always going to want more. There's always going to be stuff we want to do that we don't have the resources to do. Needs are infinite. We're never going to be able to solve everybody's problem or address everything that we think we should be addressing. And adding, fuel to the fire, values are contested, meaning that the public is not always in agreement about government, what government should be doing, what the size and scope of government and goals are. So it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. And there's so much that we can't control. So pivoting here to my research agenda, I spend a lot of time researching this thing called governance. And I'm drawn to it because I feel like it's something that we, those of us working in public administration, actually can control, actually can improve. I moonlight as a member of the Common Council here in Oshkosh, and so much of what we do is dictated by the state or the federal government, and we don't have a lot of leeway. So I keep going back to what can we control? And we can control how we do things, how we relate to one another, and we can start to control kind of the structures in which we operate in ways that we have research showing can improve practice. So yeah, we're always going to be upset that shared revenue is not where we want it to be. Unfunded mandates are going to continue. Hyperpartisan politics are probably going to continue, and maybe we can't address that, but there are things we can address. So I try to focus my research on that. And this is as sophisticated of a graphic as you're going to get today. Well, you let me know, at least in my presentation. I have one more graphic, but I think this one's cool because it's got all these boxes. But I compare this thing I call microgovernance, and I didn't come up with that term. I compare it to a giant game of telephone, because one of the questions that I really drew me to public administration was, how do governing boards matter? My dissertation was about school boards, but I also apply this work to city councils and nonprofit organizations. You know, how do these boards matter? We had this like historic idea that a governing board matters and make sure that you know there's financial responsibility and they hire and fire the executive like a city manager or superintendent. But is there more to that? And I compare it to a giant game of telephone. If I'm a city council member, I'm part of a group, stripped everything away out of it. At the end of the day, it's 7 of us that are sitting down trying to make decisions that solve that riddle that I just put up about needs being infinite and resources finite. So it begins with us making sure that we as a group have a positive dynamic where we have good types of conflict, where we're disagreeing with one another, but we're doing it in a productive way and coming to clear conclusions. So I have all these measures of group dynamics that I do survey research and observational research and interviews to try to get at, to see how a city council or a school board is actually operating at that first phase of the giant game of telephone. And that's so important because that's a foundation that allows a common council or a school board to pass on a clear message to the chief executive who's actually going to be implementing these goals. And that's that I put that in the third box there, but it's clarity of policy guidance. If I'm able to give a city manager a really clear idea as a group of what our expectations are, that city manager can then go ahead and try to implement it. And if they implement that correctly, eventually we're going to have organizational performance. And there's all kinds of research, and I've done a bunch of research specifically on school boards because that has the advantage of having a really clear accountability mechanism, school test scores, where I can actually link the quality of board deliberations to ultimate student outcomes through this process of linkages. But going back to my giant or my game of telephone analogy, if you've ever played that, you sit around a table, right? You all whisper something in the person sitting next to you, your ear, and hopefully that message comes back the same as it was delivered. Now, usually it doesn't, right? Usually somebody mishears something or somebody's acting nefariously, wants it to be funny, whatever. But I think it illustrates the fact that if you don't have that strong foundation, if you don't get that first micro governance step right, you're never going to achieve the organizational outcomes that you want. Then I look at macro governance, and this is the way that society as a whole organizes itself to deliver public goods and services. So macro governance questions are things like, how do we reform the government workforce? Do we want to have a city manager form of government, or an elected mayor, strong mayor form of government? How much contracting out do we want to do? How much cooperation do we want between governments? What's the appropriate, federalist relationship, fiscally and regulatory, between the state and local government? And all these really broad questions. And I do a lot of research on that. In particular, I've done a lot of stuff on privatization and contracting out, in particular in education. But with the way I connect these things, and this is I guess this graphics, I'll say it's more sophisticated because the arrows are going in different directions. But ultimately, I'd say both of these things matter. I think governance itself is too broad of a term, But if you connect these two things and say that, okay, if the goal of microgovernance, so managing individual organizations through governing boards, is organizational success, that's what ultimately enables our government as a whole to perform better. In turn, if we get the macro governance right, all those regulations and structures, that provides order that allows our individual organizations that are part of this broad network of public and nonprofit organizations providing public services. It gives them the order they need to actually achieve broad societal goals. I know that might sound boring to you, but I think it's exciting. I think more important, and hopefully more exciting to you, is some examples of how we connect our research. And in particular, I'll share with you how I connect the research I do to practice. First off, at any time we do a research project, we start off by talking to practitioners. One of the cool things about our MPA program is that we have a whole classroom and a whole program full of practitioners that I can chat up and mine for information. So you might not know this when you're in class with me and you're writing on a message board, but I'm tapping you for information and using your skills and your experience to help develop a research agenda that's going to have a practical impact. And I think if we're utilizing practitioners and asking the right questions and pursuing the right type of research right off the bat, we're going to have more of an impact. I also spend a lot of time trying to translate the wonky academic research I do to a language that is accessible to normal people, i.e. non-academics. So I do that through a monthly column I've been doing for 6 years now through the Public Administration Times. I also will generally say yes anytime I have a trade publication that will ask me to write a column. I also do a monthly column for the old Oshkosh Herald to try to use the city I live in as a little bit of a focus group and translate some of these things to practice. Certainly public service. I'm serving on governing boards. So I'm on the city's long-range finance committee, on the Common Council. I'm on Clarity Care, which is a big nonprofit health organization in town. I'm on their board and done a few things at the state level too, but trying to really take that 20% of my job that's supposed to be public service, and instead of it being strictly internal to the university, trying to take what we do as an outward-facing discipline and send that off to the world. Give talks, give trainings. This Friday, I'm heading up to a city in northwest Wisconsin to give a governance board training to a large, fairly large city that's having some issues with their governing. So they invited me up, and I have a little 3-hour spiel I'm going to give, and hopefully it will be impactful. But again, try to do work like that. I'm also shameless in working with media. I think that we do really good things at the UW system, at UWO, and our program in particular. So anytime we can turn a piece of research we do into an op-ed or into a news article, I'm trying to make that happen. Similarly, establishing good relationships with policymakers at the state and local level is really important. It got canceled, but I was supposed to be in Madison today talking to a legislature about establishing fire districts in the state of Wisconsin. We did a piece of research on that through the Whitburn Center. Renee, who's on the call, was a big part of that. And they want to turn that into a piece of legislation. Now, they keep delaying our meetings because they have other more pressing business, more like fighting with each other at the state level. But eventually we're going to have that meeting and there's going to be a draft. And I think that piece of research is actually going to end up changing the macro governance framework of how we do fire protection in Wisconsin, which is pretty cool to see that impact happen. And I share my example, but we all do that here. I just mentioned the Whitburn Center research. Go to our webpage, check it out. Alumni relations. I'm running out of time here, so I won't harp on that. But we stay in touch with our alumni after they graduate and keep working with them because they can really give us feedback about what we should be teaching and what their needs are in their organization. That said, I know that we can always do more. And the good news is we have Dr. Larson here who does do more, and she can share some of her work with all of you right now. So with that, I'll stop sharing and I'll turn it over to you, Sam. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
All right. Thank you, Mike. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It'll take me just a moment to switch over my slides here. So just give me one moment. All right. Mike, I'm going to ask you to let me know if you can see my slides okay here.
I can see them perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So when Mike asked me to talk a bit to you all today about kind of give some background on who I am, what I do here at UWO, and how I connect research to practice, immediately I said yes, of course. I love to talk about this stuff and connect with students to give a sense of all of the work that's being done. And as you can see, Mike he dashes from kind of border to border throughout the state of Wisconsin each week. And the thing is, I'm going to try. I thought this would be simple and easy to kind of give you a little overview, but as an academic, I used to be very shy, and it was hard for me to say more than just a few words. But now that I'm a trained academic, I tend to kind of go longer than I should. But happy to be with you today. And essentially what I'm going to do is give you kind of an overview of my background, kind of how that led me to UWO, and then just talk to you a little bit about, similar to Mike, some of the work that I've done since I've been here at UWO as an associate professor and now research director at the Whitburn Center. The first thing that I just want to share is the variety of organizations that I've worked over the years. So volunteered at other places for sure, but just to give you a sense of where I kind of come from. So I originally, I grew up in North Dakota, and my very first job was with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And so I was working as a youth conservation corps member in the summer there in near Chase Lake Wildlife Refuge. And so did a lot of kind of wildlife management work. And since then, and since that summer, that's led me to a number of other organizations, both at the federal level, state level, and local level. In my intro, it mentions that I have, experience in kind of rural, environmental, and educational spaces. Some of the other places that I've worked, gone to Montana, worked in Montana with the Montana Conservation Corps, where we also worked a lot with the Forest Service there. From there, went back to North Dakota and worked at North Dakota State while I was getting my master's degree there in sociology. Also taught at North Dakota State College of Science. From there, went out to Colorado, worked for a time there in a variety of spaces as well. But one was the Community Resource Center. And so specifically traveled throughout the state of Colorado and did like nonprofit capacity building, fund development, grant writing workshops, that sort of thing. So there's a lot here. I'm not going to touch on all of it, but this is kind of a sense of where I've come from, and UWO is there down at the bottom corner, since where I've come from, kind of where I've ended up since. And this is really what also, as Mike was saying, kind of I bring to the classroom and to the work and the research that I do today. Mike touched on this before, and so we're on the same wavelength here, because I think one thing that I know I didn't know as a student, I was a first generation college student. I didn't really know much about what professors do all day other than teach. And as a matter of fact, there is a lot more that we do. And all of those things, this isn't always true in other programs, but certainly in our program and in the public administration world, since it's so applied, much of our work overlaps between the teaching that we do, the scholarship or research that we do, and the type of service work that we do. So again, 40% of my time I'm teaching kind of a variety of courses in the program. 20% of my time I'm out in the community. Some of the previous things I've done, served on boards, the Oshkosh Food Co-op here in the city of Oshkosh is one local organization that I worked for, but also do a lot of service on campus. As Mike said, reviewing journal articles throughout the country, serving on kind of national networks like the Public Administration Theory Network or associations, things like that, that take up a good chunk of time. And then also that 40% that's left is dedicated to research. And that comes in a variety of ways. So, from publishing articles and chapters, grant writing for research projects, hosting events like this one, working with community partners on research projects, a lot of presentations, both locally and nationally, and then other types of professional development workshops and training. So a little redundant there, but maybe that's a good thing. Another thing I really want to focus on that I think is an important concept. So if you're looking at especially methodology or qualitative research methods, a specific concept that I like students to understand is this concept of reflexivity. And so when we're talking about reflexivity, really what that means when we're thinking about it in a research context is acknowledging who you are and your background in the research process. And in many of my courses, specifically in public policy analysis, I'll talk about reflexivity because whether other folks will admit it or not, who we are impacts how we see the world, right? Like what we see depends on where we stand. And so I'm not going to go through all these different facets of my identity, but one of the things that I bring to my work and to my research in the program is really the concept of social equity. So one of the identities here is that I'm a social equity scholar. And so although I've had a lot of experience working within public and nonprofit organizations, I also really like to focus on the impact that those organizations have on the people that we serve. So always going back to whether or not there's fairness and justice and equality of opportunity for the people that we live with and the people that we serve and the people that, come to our organizations or that we go out to assist in some capacity every day. And so that's just one thing I'd encourage folks because there's kind of the old rational kind of approach to research that encourages people to try to be as neutral and as objective as possible. And all the work that I've done as a social equity scholar over, the last 15 plus 20 years, really that's a difficult thing to do. I would say quite impossible thing to do. So understanding where we come from is really important in the research that's done. The other piece of this that I really want to highlight, again, Dr. Ford touched on this, but of all my identities, one of the biggest pieces of my identity is that I'm a community engaged scholar. And so again, this really means connecting with the people beyond the university. And that's something that some people see as kind of a radical thing. But what I love about Wisconsin is that is kind of hinged on this concept of the Wisconsin idea, right? This kind of like long tradition throughout the state that's based on this principle that education should influence people's lives beyond the boundaries of the classroom. And the other piece of that, I just put a, kind of a little historical newspaper ad here up that comes from the era in which that was brought about. Really focusing on local government, right? Like helping cities to help themselves. So really encouraging that connection between university systems and local communities. I just love that. And so it's really important to me to bring that community engaged scholarship identity and component to scholarship, but also, again, just a reminder that overlaps for us very much into the teaching and service that we all do. I just want to briefly touch on kind of the development and the chapters of my scholarship journey, I guess is how I started to think about it. So, throughout the time that I've been working, I've also been earning degrees in some capacity. So my master's degree in sociology, that was at North Dakota State. One of the things that I started to look at there right away was it was in the time of kind of like 2008 is when I started, which was, the country kind of overall was in a time of economic recession. The Great Recession was just getting into full sway, but North Dakota was doing really well economically because of the oil and gas development that started happening in the Bakken Formation in North Dakota. So I really started to look at how that impacted women, specifically as the development continued, and really started to understand that the status of women, even though economically the state was doing really well, the status of women was going down at that time. So started to really look at the tension between development and how that impacts other people. And that's a long story. You can read my entire thesis about it, but that's really where I got my start. Also really started to focus on gender equity in higher ed at that time, and also violence prevention work that I started to do actually with community partners at NDSU as a master's student. And so I came from the nonprofit world there, and essentially I utilized my experience from the nonprofit world to focus on fundraising efforts for local women's shelters, domestic violence shelters. I taught a course at NDSU as a master's student on how to do fundraising efforts specifically for kind of social justice oriented causes based on my nonprofit experience. From there, went on to get my PhD in public affairs at the University of Colorado, Denver. And there I still kind of sit on that equity track, but started to focus more so in larger metropolitan contexts at racial and economic equity work. Also started focusing on kind of like more broadly on other kind of historically excluded groups and how public policy and service impacts those folks. And also started to get a bit more into kind of emergency management, climate policy work at that time. Moving to UWO, so I came here in 2017, and as an associate professor, have continued a lot of that work. I won't get into it here because I think it's more interesting in the next slide here. But then also as a research director, through the Whitburn Center, have been doing a lot more, have had a lot more opportunities to work within the community, specifically on very similar efforts. So the bullet points here touch on these things, and they're in the next couple slides too. But I recently worked with an alum of our program, Lindsay Erickson, on evaluating the city bus program for K through 12 students in Oshkosh, looking at increasing access to students throughout the city. Renee, a current student and our research assistant, is on the call. She's been working with us on looking at social vulnerability and resilience in emergency management planning in 14 counties in East Central Wisconsin. And then also looking at, this is more so within the institution, but some gender equity work focusing on recruitment and retention of STEM faculty at UWO with that project. So a lot going on outside the classroom. Moving from kind of chapters of my life to literal book chapters. So I wanted to highlight this, that one of the things that I really love to do is work with students on research that's of interest to them. And this has actually led to both technical reports, but actual publications in textbooks. So I published a chapter with Crystal Soderman, who's now actually getting her PhD at Denver in the same program I came from. This was a couple of years ago in Global Equity and Administration. So this focused on Truth and Reconciliation Commission work in South Africa, and how some of the ways that has worked to overcome kind of political division and historical state-sponsored violence could potentially be translated to US context. I have also worked with a former student, Jack Tierney, published a chapter on performance management and learning, and how social equity metrics can be brought into performance management systems. So that textbook just came out this summer. And then this will be published soon, but I had mentioned that I previously worked on a technical report with the Public Health Office and Lindsay Erickson here in Oshkosh, and a chapter that's related to that on transit equity will be coming out this spring in this Achieving Social Equity textbook. So related to that, some other work that's been done in my, actually through courses. So this one back in 2020, we previously worked for a number of years with the city of Oshkosh, and students in the public policy analysis course contributed to doing a citizen survey and writing a report for the city. That is on the city's website, along with a number of years of reports. So one example Another example, this was a special topics class that I taught, I think it was 2 years ago now, on equitable and resilient communities. And so we put together a report looking at the county level emergency management planning initiatives that have focused, the extent to which those have focused on socially vulnerable groups or not. And so you can, it's too tiny probably for you to see, but a number of students contributed to that, and also research assistants, student research assistants. And then more recently as well, this project that we worked on with the public health office that I've mentioned before. And here are just a couple of other examples. I know Dr. Ford mentioned this too, but we do research presentations to organizations locally and nationally. So I've presented to the Wisconsin City County Management Association, the Association of Local Government Auditors, a nonprofit called Hunger Free Colorado, FEMA. So kind of multiple types of folks who reach out. And what's really important here is, I think, at least doing the research and bringing the work out to folks, but also, staying up to date, because I think the entire, as we think about policy even, right? Like I'm an evaluation person. And so I think we should be constantly evaluating policy and making changes to improve our policy, improve our outcomes. I think the same thing is true in the classroom. Like we want to constantly be evaluating what's happening out in the world, what's working, what isn't, instead of only relying on, the same textbook our entire careers for every class. So kind of the dynamic nature of the work we all do really, I think, lends itself well, and hopefully the students in our classes see that too. And then just really quickly, I hope I haven't taken up way too much time, but I haven't been tracking it. But just a couple of reflections on, this entire kind of like idea of connecting research to practice. And I've been trying to think about this for professors, but also for students and people who are out working in the field. I started with mentioning kind of my reflexivity statement, or kind of all the multiple identities I bring to my lens when I'm doing research work. I would highly encourage you to create your own reflexivity statement. Like, what are the different components of your background that you think influence how you see the world? Because I think that's a really important place to start. It also helps you understand what you're missing and who else you need to invite or bring to the table to collaborate with, to do the best work that can be done, to understand things as deeply as they can be understood. And that lends itself to the next piece, right? Engaging stakeholders. So people with different perspectives, different backgrounds, different lived experience. Good quality research really requires more than one person looking out in the world and telling you what they see, I believe. And even if it's only you reviewing it, right, in your classes or whatever it might be, in reporting or writing something, get someone else who knows nothing about it to read it and let you know if they understand what you're trying to say or not. In our work as researchers, if we publish something in a journal, we have at least 3 reviewers review our work and send us feedback, and either say this is great, but much more often say this needs a lot of work and you have a lot more work to do. And so that's a really important piece, is bringing other people's lenses into the work that we all do. Another piece I think is always a good start in doing this work is, conducting comparisons, often like looking at what other people are doing and what works in other comparable, whether it's organizations or cities or universities or whatever, and what doesn't. And so using that as a starting point. Balancing time and resources. So like understanding that good research takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And so understanding your limitations within that, I think, is really important, especially when you're working with community partners. And the last thing I'll just say that's related to that is preparing for the long term. So going out and doing one study for someone is, not necessarily going to be effective. It's really important to understand that like a solid relationship with people is really important, and helping kind of people think through like what an issue might be and what types of strategies might be utilized to address that issue. And then that needs to be kind of evaluated over time is really important. And There are no kind of quick fixes, and I'm sure each of you has experience that lends itself to that. But sometimes I think when we're only focusing on the research side, we can lose sight of that. And so again, I'll just end by saying that's why I think connecting our research to practice is so important, because otherwise we kind of lose sight of these things. So I'll end there, and thank you all.
Hey, Dr. Larson, so
Yeah.
we had a question in there about what you mean by conduct comparisons.
Yeah, clarify conduct comparisons, please.
Yeah.
Sorry, just saw that. So I think so a really good example of that I think is a good starting point. So for instance, I'll use the example of the transit equity work that we did in the city of Oshkosh, right? So that program came from a number of people coming together and saying, you know what, the city of Appleton has a program where K through 12 students can ride the city buses for free. And the city of Sheboygan also has a K through 12 program where those students can ride the city buses for free. And from what we can tell, that has been really positive for those communities and for those students. And so we should look at developing a proposal to bring something similar to that to Oshkosh. And so I hope that clarifies it. It's as simple as that. Like that's an evaluative technique. And I can pull from that and say, like, that connects to this whole theory, this whole policy theory called diffusion of innovation theory, that demonstrates that, cities, states, nations, they often look to other folks who are doing good things that they think would work well, and bring them to their communities and test it out. And so I think that's essentially what I'm getting at there. Mike, does that make sense? Or for
that makes perfect sense. And as an aside, the N size of 1, which is my high school son, is very much appreciative of that program because he's using it every day.
That's good stuff.
Awesome. Well, should we turn it over to Jennifer? I don't know, Jennifer, if you want to tell us just a little bit about your work and how your experience in the MPA program translates or doesn't translate to what you're doing.
Absolutely, and thank you for the invitation to be here and to share. And my talk will be a lot less formal. I'm sorry, I don't have anything prepared for you. But following what Dr. Larson shared, I wanted to share who I am and where I come from. I am an enrolled member of the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin. I have worked for this community for forever. I won't say how long. My starts are with tribal government, and I worked there for a number of years. Also worked with the Division of Extension for up until last Friday for about 11 years. And then I've been in this role as the Sustainable Development Institute Director for a whole 3 days. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about and share with you is focused on my time with Extension, and how kind of the reverse, how the practitioner work kind of led into some of the research. So first, I cannot say enough about how wonderful the MPA program is. I did not think that higher education or like graduate courses were something that were accessible to me. I graduated from UW-Madison, immediately began working in the community, and over time I could feel like I need to learn more. I need to be able to contribute more. I don't know what to do. Had heard of colleagues that were going on to graduate school and started to do some research. And for, I won't tell you how many years, but for years, I kept going back to the UW Oshkosh Public Administration program and would look and look and look. And finally, I like took the leap and applied, was accepted, and just like completely immersed myself in this program. Very non-traditional student, was probably always like the oldest student in the class, had a lot of real life work practitioner experience, and absorbed like absolutely everything that the course had to offer. Every class that I took was relevant, or I had some experience that explained why things were happening in the workplace around me. And it just helped me, and I will quote, because I heard Dr. Ford say this in one of our classes, it helped me to be a better consumer of information. After graduating in 2018, I had all of these tools and all of these resources that helped me contribute to community, helped uplift our partners, and helped see work in a really different way. So being an enrolled tribal member is like core to my being, and there's a way of doing things locally. We are a sovereign government. We are our own nation state. We have a very different relationship with the federal and state government than municipalities do and county governments do. And finding ways to work the MPA, what I had learned there, and understanding those systems a little bit better, understanding the integration between those, and then also finding different and new ways to do program and outreach and education to community. A lot of my work within Extension was as a community development educator, and I provided a lot of support to both our tribal government and to our county government and to our higher education institution, helping them with strategic planning, with organizational development, program planning, and then also myself creating and implementing programs. And the reason for a lot of the collaboration and partnerships there was what Dr. Ford had mentioned, is that all governments exist in an environment of resource scarcity. There's a lot of partnerships and relationships, and it made sense for people to start working together, communicating together, and making the best use of those limited resources so that they have a bigger impact in community. So I really, brokered a lot of partnerships there, used the tools that I gained in MPA to, identify strategic plans and strategic issues and help people work better together. As far as the program side, everything that I created and developed within my time within Extension was based in community need. It was never like a top-down approach, like here's what we're going to do for you. It was like, what are your needs and how can we best meet those needs? So some of the innovative programmings that we did integrated Indigenous ways of being, language, and culture with health, and took a whole different approach to health and community development and community planning. And we transformed the way that people approach health. So it was no longer about if you eat right, if you exercise right, if we're building the sidewalk, here's all the things that are going to happen. It was just connecting people to their environment and providing them with things that they already knew, not mentioning like you're the unhealthiest person here, and if you do these things everything is going to be fine, but really just uplifting people and providing them the things that they were asking for, which centered on language and culture, and our built environment. Through all of that work was really like hands-on practitioner education, outreach, building relationships, assessing along the way. As we started collecting data and assessing, we started seeing patterns and started to see some changes happening. Our funders started to notice those changes too. So one of our major funders was the Centers for Disease Control. They really liked our approach to policy development and adoption with our community partners. So we shared that out nationally, our process and approach to that. Was invited to speak to the American Public Health Association and shared on how we approached nutrition and wellness. And then another project that we worked on was creating an entire leadership system that was steeped in tribal values. So it was centered around building community rather than building the individual. And because of the success that we had with that, we were invited to speak at the World Community Development Conference for Indigenous peoples. So just really all of these things that we were just doing because they were the good things to do and the things that people were asking for actually led to research. So as of now, we have 3 research articles that are in process that we hope to have published within the next year. And the purpose behind the research is not to add to our CVs or to our resumes, but to help other communities that are in the early stages of trying to figure things out for their communities to get a head start. So our research focus is really to help others and provide support for others. I think the other role that I played and will probably continue to play, and I learned this word this week, Dr. Larson, was being a cultural broker. Being who I am and having the experience that I have, a lot of federal and state people would reach out to me to figure out how they can work with tribal communities, understanding that relationship between tribe and state and tribe and federal government. And then also understanding that research with tribal communities is different, and that every tribe has its own different approach to research. We have a very long history of extractive research, and as a result of that, many tribal communities have processes where external researchers need to come in and ask for permission and provide specific details of surveys and how they're using and publishing, and that the tribe retains right to information. So being in that place, I've really been able to help a lot of external institutions understand tribal communities. I'm not sure if there's anything else that I can add, but other than like the Master of Public Health program really helped me figure out my role, gave me the tools that I needed to succeed, gave me a voice. Again, Dr. Larson, I really liked your presentation where you said, like, I didn't know how to do these things. I didn't know how to talk, didn't have a voice. And I really feel like the education with this program gave me what I needed to be, I don't know if successful, but helped me be able to do what I do. I think if I can say anything about after graduation, I graduated in 2018 and have continued to remain connected to the MPA program. It's just phenomenal. I cannot say enough about how much I loved this program and wish I could go back and take more courses. I've been mentoring students, helping to build our alumni network. UW Oshkosh supports postgraduate education, which is incredible because there's a lot of work and projects out there that need to be completed. And I'll end it with, this is just an outstanding program. And if you're a practitioner, this is just going to make you even better than you already are.
Jennifer, you are amazing. We want you to come back as a faculty member. I just say that. I have no authority to offer you a job, but no, you're doing amazing things. Thank you so much for sharing that. Just so cool. So cool. So we still have about 10 minutes left here. If anybody in the audience has questions, I did see the one in the chat, and Dr. Larson, if you don't mind, is there a ranking taxonomy when you talk about reflexivity?
I saw that after the fact. Yeah. So John, there's not necessarily in what I presented to you, there's no kind of ranking taxonomy in that, but there is some work by, her name is Patricia Hill Collins, that it's kind of a matrix approach that she takes, which is, it's not exactly reflexivity, but it's highly related to that helps us think through like different dimensions of our identities and how they kind of come together to either provide benefit or burden on people, given the kind of ecosystems that we live in and the political systems that we live in. So
I love that, Professor Larson. That was the first time I ever really saw that kind of a conceptual presentation. There are times during our life's travels that we enter into certain spheres of influence where we may second guess who we are because we're not exactly necessarily in a certain identity lane with peers or colleagues. And it's nice to see that through the reflexivity approach, that it's perfectly okay to have multiple dimensions, multiple faces of our experience, our life experience. And the other thing, if I may also comment on when you said conduct comparisons, the first thing that popped into my mind was and I wrote this down. Am I in a groupthink zone which may offer safety in terms of comparisons, or am I in what's called a blue ocean strategy where I am purely innovative? And so there could be like a whole continuum of where we place our own self in that process of conducting comparisons.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to write a paper on exactly that.
Okay.
John.
One of my favorite books as an undergraduate business student, and I pulled it off the shelf just so I can quote it properly. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy, and it's an old book. It was written in 2015 by W. Chan Kim and Renee Malburn. And the whole premise of Blue Ocean Strategy is that you approach the marketplace, if you will, marketplace of ideas, with such an innovative mindset that you don't even look back to compare.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's really interesting, especially because I mean, there's certain things, probably ideas or ways we've done things in the past that probably do need to go away. And there's certainly a place for that type of, for that type of strategy or that type of thinking. Really interesting. I'll have to read that. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions or comments for any of us, or questions about the MPA program? Random thoughts about the weather? Well, I'll ask a question then of Dr. Larson. And I guess, what's the value, the students that you've worked with, what's the value of the doing a research project with you, research project with faculty? Just obviously there's the learning and all that, but I'm curious what their experience has been, aside from just having a publication.
Sure. Yeah. We have at least 2 students here who have done research projects with us, so it might be better to ask other students what the benefit is. Renee and Alex. Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Ford.
Yeah, I think Renee did that because she knew I was calling on her. Renee, are you still here? Oh, I don't think she is here. So Alex is on the spot. Renee's probably out fighting a fire. And lest you think I'm being not literal, she's a firefighter. So she very well could be.
Yeah, I can. I'll do my best to stand in for Renee, who's terrific. But my name's Alex Tremblay. I'm an MPA graduate as well. I want to start by saying it was the best thing I ever did, and that's bar none. My 1-year-old daughter isn't here, so she can't hear me say that. But it's a terrific program, and the benefit of doing the research is that I think not only, again, is there the opportunity for publication, which I'm working on right now, the opportunity to just learn more, but like Dr. Larson, Dr. Ford, they push you to make sure that the question that you're asking is right, and to form these scientific ideas and not just kind of, throw a dart at a wall and see what sticks. And it makes you a lot more well-rounded as a practitioner too. I think that because this is practitioner focused, the research that students do is a lot more directly applicable, right? And that's a huge focus, as we want not just to do research, we want to do research that's going to make your work better. And so a lot of benefit to those projects, and I'm grateful for it.
And I'll follow up on that, Alex. So Alex, just so folks know, is an amazing alum and working on a PhD right now and doing some really great work in kind of the emergency response world, and is just another, we're like proud parents almost of all of our alums. And it's awesome to see alums staying connected with the program, because I'm of firm belief that we can only do so much with people in, 2-3 years. There's a lot more that can be done after that. So, but the one other thing I'll mention about, working with students on publications, and I'll mention Lindsay Erickson in the transit equity chapter we're publishing right now. Lindsay, when her and I talked about collaborating on this, one of the things that we really shared, I grew up in rural North Dakota, went off to, live in some larger areas, larger cities. And then in doing research, when you look for examples, it's really hard to find examples for smaller communities, rural communities. So when we came together, the fact that Lindsay had expertise and experience in Oshkosh, and we utilized the case study from Oshkosh to publish this chapter about how to improve transit equity in a small city. I think it goes back to Jennifer's point. It's not just for the publication, it's to like start the conversation and start encouraging people to share what's happening in cities like Oshkosh or Fargo, North Dakota, where I came from, right? Like smaller communities who don't have the same resources or environments as Denver or Minneapolis or Seattle or Austin, Texas, right? So that's more of a benefit. I think it's a benefit for students, but I think for me and for the field more significantly, getting the input and the lens from our students who have so much expertise, like you started the presentation with, Mike, right? Our students are our greatest resource. That really comes through in those publications as well. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, well said, Dr. Larson. Well, we are up against it, so I'll turn it over to Lisa Lewis if you want to tell the folks a little bit about other events, and we'll send you all on your way.
Yes, thank you to Dr. Ford, Dr. Larson, and Jennifer for sharing their research, and thank you to everyone for coming. If you have any further questions, you can email the Whitburn Center at whitburncenter@uwosh.edu. And we also invite you to join us tonight at the Culver Family Welcome Center from 5 to 7 p.m. for a presentation titled, "Is Wisconsin Plugged into the Electric Vehicle Evolution?" A buffet will be served to those in attendance, and it will also be live streamed via Zoom and recorded for anyone who cannot attend in person. And next month, we'll be having a special Whitburn Wednesday event presented by a trainer from the university's Employee Assistant Program titled Communicating Change to Employees. It will take place virtually on October 11th at noon, and we will send out an email announcement closer to the date. And thank you to everybody for joining us again, and enjoy the rest of your day.